the person who has been elected is also in such a strange situation. He is not yet in power. Taking action while not officially president is a risky matter under American law. And since they are constantly trying to imprison Donald Trump, I think he will think 5 times about what can be done and what cannot in this limbo, in this interim period. That's why suddenly the enormous wind of the campaign has stopped and our sailboat is stuck there. The peace sailboat is stranded on the open sea, pondering what will happen now. So we are facing a very difficult, exciting and complicated 2 months. We have only one task because we do not have American law. We need to solve the American problems. That's the task if we understand as it affects us. We must work on achieving change in Brussels because even though our allied fighter won in America, our peace-supporting ally won, but there hasn't been a change in Brussels yet, and that's truly our task because we are members of the European Union. So we must continuously push for a peace-supporting shift in Brussels to prevent the thought that we could continue this war without the Americans from accidentally taking root. That we are capable of continuing this war without the Americans. There are supporters of this idea, but they need to be pushed back and compelled through a sensible dialogue to explain how exactly we will do this without the Americans. We will support Ukraine without destroying our own economies, because there is certainly not enough money in Europe to finance this war without America. Therefore, Hungary must continue its struggle for peace, now with Brussels as the location, backed by a significant success that has stirred American expectations. This is what the matter of peace looks like. Overall, I saw it as possible, and within the logic of governmental responsibility, it is conceivable how to create a peace-oriented budget despite the open war versus peace battle in Brussels.
So let's submit. Will be an American state, which clearly illustrates the competitiveness issues. Just a week ago, the Union heads of state and government met in Budapest, and under the leadership of the Hungarian presidency, they agreed on a competitiveness pact. When and what results can be expected from this package?
"10 to 15 years ago, the economic development of the United States and Europe was either stagnant or progressing. And if I look at the last 11 or so years, the European economy grew by about 15%, while the American economy grew by 65%. 15 versus 65, this means the Americans have outpaced us. I haven't even mentioned China or the emerging Asian economies because they race PQP, they race past Europe like a high-speed train. Now I'm just talking about America. So they have pulled ahead of us. And since we belong to the same cultural circle and started from an equal level of development some 10 or so years ago, we must ask what we are doing wrong. The Americans must be doing something right. And this question needs to be answered. Someone is responsible for this. After all, someone is directing the European economic policy. There is a commission, it has a president. There are 30,000 bureaucrats who, I don't know exactly what they do, but it's certainly not good because otherwise we would have also grown by 65%. So decisions are made there, trade policy decisions, price regulations, decisions about sanctions, energy regulation issues, green transition matters. These were obviously bad decisions because if they hadn't been, we would at least be on par with the Americans.
High alert!
Must be held accountable for the European institutions because they clearly messed up the past 5 to 10 years. Hungary got through this relatively well. Hungarians who travel west less frequently might not see it as clearly as I do that we got through it relatively well. As compared to other European countries, we slowed down much less or fell out of development less significantly. Moreover, the countries that are wealthier than us, and of course still wealthier, have had terrible years in the recent period, even more so than Hungary. If you talk to a German or a French person, like a regular person with a family and their own home, and ask them how their family's monthly budget looks, what they spend money on, you will see horrifying reactions, opinions, and figures because, of course, there is no utility cost reduction there. The increase in energy costs has consumed a significant portion of family budgets. Despite this, they are still wealthier than us because they never experienced communism, a planned economy, the Soviet Union, or the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance, so they have a historical advantage. However, compared to their own past, everyone there is complaining. There are understandable reasons. So, in response to your question, what I want to say is that there is no time.
Well,
So President Macron said that if the European Union doesn't change its strategy immediately, then in 2 to 3 years, I would have heard that I use this expression. Coming from the French president, whose country is the second strongest economy in Europe, it sounds more than alarming. I say that if we don't make certain decisions in the next 6 months, if we cannot pass certain decisions in Brussels, then it cannot be prevented that what the French president talked about will happen, which is that in 2 to 3 years we will have packed up and closed shop. What must be done in the next 6 months? First of all, energy prices need to be reduced. So there's no competition where the Americans pay 4 times less for electricity and gas than Europeans, and we win, not them. It's impossible to win that way. No matter what we do, even if we stand on our heads, pull any trick, or pull a rabbit out of a hat, such a competitive disadvantage cannot be overcome. We will lose this if we try to compensate. So we absolutely need to lower energy prices. This means we need to review the sanctions because with such sanction policies, energy prices will not go down.
Thanks for the subtitles.
It will be worthwhile for those who argued in favor of the sanctions, but not for us because we will see this as a victory. However, the other side must change as otherwise it will ruin the European economy. It's not easy. They must admit they made mistakes in the past and return to a rejected logic. So it's not an easy political struggle, but we must continuously push them. And we must declare a bureaucratic revolution because in the Union, the second biggest issue is that there are so many ridiculous rules, unrealistic and out-of-touch regulations, and this kills the economy. In the next 6 months, we need to achieve these two performances, these two results. What are the chances for this? Because we know how the European Union bureaucracy works, and it usually takes a longer time for a regulation or a plan to reach the point of practical implementation. 30%. The chance, in my opinion, is 30%, which is why it is very important not to wait for Brussels. So I am called to rebellion. We need to revolt. Where Brussels tries to impose something harmful on Hungarian families, we simply have to resist and rebel. And not stealthily or sneakily, but openly and straightforwardly, as we did in the case of migration. Our budget is an open rebellion. It includes utility cost reduction, we are launching housing support, and we are initiating small business support programs. If I remember correctly, in 2025, more than 300 new investments were launched. This translates to over 8 trillion forints worth of investments starting, out of which we will pay 480 billion next year. Then during this year and the next, about 500 projects will be completed. We are launching massive railway projects, undertaking motorway renovations and constructions, building a university, and finally we will be able to complete the Hempel Children's Hospital. Major, significant projects are starting, which are in stark contrast to what Brussels is doing.
By the way, let's look at last week's summit from a political perspective. Many expected it to serve as a kind of protest forum against the Hungarian government's policies. Some even suggested they wouldn't attend. Contrary to this, we witnessed a unity among the leaders of EU institutions and member states that hasn't been seen in a long time. What could be the reason for this?
The reason for this is named Mario Draghi.
Thank you.
I would gladly take credit for us creating some form of complete agreement, even if it only lasted for 2 days, but that's not the case. Hungary did contribute, but we didn't play the decisive role in this. Instead, the former president of the European Central Bank, at the request of Brussels, he prepared a study on the state of the European economy and presented it here in Budapest to the prime ministers and heads of state. It was so striking, so overwhelming. It leaves a lasting impression when you read it. So there, what I don't understand is why the liberal media at home constantly tries to depict it as some kind of civilizational struggle. One must not say that things are going badly in the West, because somehow a significant portion of opinion leaders in Hungary views this as an ideological issue. If someone mentions the decline of the Western economy, they are immediately labeled as some kind of Eastern dictator. That's why there isn't a meaningful dialogue on this topic in Hungary. However, as Mr. Draghi described it, it is not a decline, it is a nosedive. Well, Europe is on a path that is akin to suicide. And I think this hit the European leaders hard because while they usually speak about such issues in their own language, I always say that the language of Brussels politics is like the French royal courts. Its language resembles that of the medieval times, where every court competed with one another about who could say nicer and better things about the king. Brussels is now structured this way too. We gather, and that's the competition, though we Hungarians are left out of this. Because it doesn't suit us, but the others compete to see who can speak more softly, smoothly, and melodically about European unity, European values and European institutions, conceiving songs like modern-day minstrels instead of facing the real problems. But here in Pest there was no opportunity for that, not because of me or Hungary, but because of President Draghi, who laid this paper on the table, complete with 70 tables and annexed documents. That's the situation. I believe this created the atmosphere, the moment when everyone agreed that indeed, given the situation, since it is stated by the respected former central bank governor Mario Draghi, respected within the union by everyone, it must now be taken seriously in this situation. Decisions need to be made and we must embark on their implementation path. This is how the Budapest Consensus and the Budapest Declaration, the Budapest Statement on Competitiveness were created, which surprisingly, we were able to get accepted smoothly by all member states.
We have little time, Basha, not too much to say, but let's touch on this topic because there is a national consultation about the new economic policy, which is said to aim at strengthening the government in important matters. At the same time, it was also mentioned that in important issues, we are no longer alone, as all of America is with us. Why is there still a need for the consultation if America is with us?
Consultations always have two purposes. One is that you need ammunition for the Brussels battles. There aren't wars there, but political battles, so we don't fight with bullets, machine guns, or mortars, but with political arguments. In a democracy, the strongest political argument is the people themselves, the will of the people. If that is present, then you can fight. If not, you cannot. The other purpose of the consultation is for those who are willing to think about Hungary's future. Among the 10 million people, not everyone is willing to do this. It's not their habit. They live differently. They don't have time for it. And they have more important things to do. So we know how everyday life goes. However, there's always around 1 million to 1.5 million people. If the government asks them to take a few minutes to think about Hungary's future with some questions to help and inspire thought, and where we are curious about their opinion, then around 1 to 1.5 million people are willing to participate and think, expressing opinions on important questions about the country's future. If someone is willing to do this, they will certainly talk to someone else. There might be more people there as well. So it is easy for the national consultation to be suitable for millions of people to exchange at least a few words on certain matters that concern our shared future. In this sense, the national consultation is also suitable for community involvement in the major questions about the country's future political dilemmas, which is why it's worth distributing it everywhere. So I ask everyone to fill it out, take a few minutes to express what you think, and then take a few more to discuss with others what your thoughts are. Perhaps others will also have ideas, making the country stronger both spiritually, intellectually, and politically, as well as more united.
I asked Prime Minister Viktor Orban about next year's budget, the prospects for peace, and the outcomes of last week's EU summit.